Give me a mic check. All set.
Welcome to Blood Binge, where we satisfy your thirst for all things horror. My name is Jacque, and today we're looking at the 1980 classic, Friday the 13th, to figure out exactly where each character falls on the moral spectrum of good to evil. Friday the 13th has gone down in horror history as one of the most iconic and influential franchises in the slasher subgenre. It follows the stories of Camp Crystal Lake counselors who are being picked off one by one. It could be the death curse people keep getting warned of and inexplicably ignoring, any one of the creepy characters from the nearby town, or the ghost of the boy that drowned there years prior.
You'll never come back again.
Maybe not the best place for a summer job. Of course, the main focus of the story is the noble hockey enthusiast who selflessly dedicates his life to stopping teenagers from indulging in the dangers of premarital sex and underage drinking. But before Jason, there was his mom. Any real horror fans know that Jason doesn't start killing until the sequels. In the first one, it's his mother getting all grizzly with the unsuspecting sex-crazed teenagers. But did they deserve it? Today we'll be ranking the cast of Friday the 13th from good to evil. But first, let's go over the rules. First up, we'll be breaking down characters into three categories: the good, the gray area, and the bad to evil, starting with the most noble and ending with the most evil. Afterwards, we'll check the full leaderboard to see who the biggest saints and sinners are, as well as reveal our in-depth ranking of killers' evil level. Our depraved formula will rank our killers on a scale of 1 to 100 to see how they stack up against other horror movie killers. Finally, we're focusing on the original Friday the 13th. Since people mostly remember the hockey mask wearing, machete wielding Jason, we know you're anxious to see him join his mommy dearest on our evil board. We promise we will be covering the sequels, crossover, and even remake in future videos. But for right now, we're just going to start at the beginning. An action scene in subsequent movies will not be under consideration. With all that said, let's get running. And hopefully not slowly, right into the arms of a killer while tripping a few times along the way. I mean, that would be ridiculous. Why would we even joke about that? As usual, we'll start with the most noble character and work our way down. These characters are the good. The gold medal for most good character has to go to Annie. With so many counselors and so little screen time, it was actually really difficult to make some of these decisions. They all seem like moderately good, possibly gray area people, and so throughout our whole list, we really had to split hairs. And yes, sometimes entire heads full of hair got the axe for something small. This is a situation where not surviving very long may have really worked to Annie's benefit. She's not in the movie long enough for us to see her make many mistakes, moral mistakes that is. She could have been a lot smarter in her survival attempts, but she faces everything with a good attitude. She takes the position as counselor because she wants to work with kids, and was willing to hitchhike in order to take the position. She seems like a sort of down on her luck kind of person who is genuinely trying to make the best of her moderate situation. Even the creepy things she experiences in the town and with the multiple drivers who take her toward the camp, she keeps a smile on her face. We applaud her for that. Mrs. Voorhees, however, did not. The silver medal of good goes to Bill. He does a lot of little things that contribute to this. And like we said, it was a close race start to finish. He never complains about having to go out in the rain, look at generators, kill snakes, or whatever other ridiculous errand needs done.
I better take a look.
He seems to be the hardest worker at the camp, save maybe for Alice, but she also expects him to do things. And speaking of her, our bronze medal of good goes to Alice. We are sometimes partial to our final girls, and we wouldn't blame you for thinking Alice would walk home with the gold medal. She's a good person, we root for her, and she's one of the best developed characters in the movie. She makes it all the way to the end, which she does by being smart and resourceful. We already mentioned that she's a hard worker, and the fact that she stays at her position for the kids and her friends, even after things start to get weird, shows that she's not a quitter. She also seems to be the most concerned about the other counselors when people start to go missing, which we'll admit is a point against Bill, who thinks it's not an emergency and can be explained.
What is going on?
While we like Alice and she has a lot of admirable qualities, she also has some negative traits. One is that she is very dependent on other people, regardless of how smart she can be on her own. That all seems to go out the window when there's anyone else to weigh in. Being naive isn't exactly a moral crime, but her inability to stand her ground ultimately leads to Bill's death when she lets him go out alone. There's also the snake incident. A lot of her bossiness in the movie seems to just be her communicating orders from someone else, but when she finds a snake in her room, she makes Bill come deal with it. She demands that the snake gets killed, but then seems willing to laugh and tease Bill, who actually looks more scared about it than she does.
What do I do?
Kill it.
She calls the others in as well, and they all make the situation worse for the poor man, who could have easily gotten attacked when they try to flush it out at him without giving him room to back up or time to prepare. That seems like a minor enough thing that wasn't entirely Alice's fault, but in this movie, we really did have to consider every action, and this one lost her some points. Following our best counselors is Sergeant Tierney. He seems so sane and grounded in comparison to Officer Dorff, even though we do think they both probably mean well. He gives Steve a ride back when Steve's car can't pull the trailer through the rain, and this is really the only thing he does, but a single good deed goes a long way when most characters only have the time to do 1 or 2 deeds. And yes, we're aware that he did technically leave Steve out in the rain instead of getting him all the way to the camp. But there was a time-sensitive emergency situation that kept him from going that extra way, and it's hard to blame him for that. Next up is Brenda. There's not a lot to say about her other than she's a good mix of fun and responsible. Although she encourages other members of the staff to join her in some drinking and strip Monopoly of all things, she knows when it's time to quit and get some work done. If she loses points for anything, it's for the fact that it takes her so long to go and investigate the voice calling for help. Since that's what ultimately gets her killed though, maybe she was right not to jump up right away. And finally, we have Sandy. Sandy, if you don't remember, is the diner waitress. That's about it. We don't know much about her, but she's good with people and even better with her regulars.
You can't go back out there in that rain. You want to get drowned?
She keeps a smile on her face, makes some fun banter, and doesn't do anything evil, which on this list is enough to qualify her as good. With that said, our good section comes to a close. These next characters fall in the neutral territory of our morality spectrum. This is the gray area. Perhaps surprisingly, our first gray character is Ralph, better known as Crazy Ralph. The police are looking for him. If you haven't seen the movie for a while, you're probably remembering Ralph as one of the bad guys. I know I was. He's crazed, he's persistent, the police are looking for him, but even as the harbinger of doom, the creepy man that goes rogue to aggressively warn counselors not to reopen Camp Crystal Lake is very well intentioned.
You're doomed if you stay here.
And it turns out that he's right. They shouldn't have tried to reopen the camp. Since Ralph believes that and doesn't want people to get hurt, we sort of get why he goes out of his way to try and scare people off. Ideally, he would tell his wife where he was going so she didn't have to worry, and he wouldn't just creep into the cabin to scare the employees he thinks are already marked for death. For those reasons, he doesn't quite make the good section, but he gets a ton of credit for trying. After him, we have Marcy. We almost put her and Jacque in reverse order because they are really pretty close. They're a young couple that do their work, hang out together, get some alone time, and are killed for it back to back. With similar amounts of screen time and a similar role in the story, this was a particularly close call. We put Marcy just a sliver higher because she's fleshed out a little more and seems to have more dimension as a result. This is the rare instance where that helps her out on a morality list. Immediately after her, of course, is Jacque. Since we know more about his girlfriend, we understand her motivations better. She's afraid of the storm going on, she has nightmares. We get that she'd rather seek solace in her boyfriend than sit with a group of people she doesn't know as well. Jacque comes across more as, well, the sex-crazed teenager. He's really only in the movie to be with Marcy and then to immediately die for it. And that comes back to bite him, both on screen and in our rankings. And on that note, we now have Barry and Claudette, sort of the original Jacque and Marcy, if you will. They are, of course, the counselor couple that dies at the beginning of the film, and they're pretty similar. Sure, Claudette plays Christian guitar music for her friends, while Barry seems to bring girls to a creepy attic space for sex all the time. This was 1958. I guess this was how things were back then. But Claudette also seems to encourage this behavior in him, will abandon a social gathering to attend their sex addict meetup, and doesn't help either of them survive even though she has more time to react. Barry might still be a little worse. In a very significant way, they represent all Crystal Lake counselors, with their one-tracked minds, terrible timing, and horrendous survival instincts. Example, Barry may still be pitching a tent when he gets murdered.
We weren't doing anything, we were just messing around.
And is she throwing empty cardboard boxes at the killer? This couple is really setting the self-defense bar low. These are the traits that make Mrs. Voorhees want to kill everyone. Following this pair is the one and only Officer Dorff. He doesn't do anything evil or bad in the film except for be unnecessarily creepy and aggressive with the counselors.
We ain't gonna stand for no weirdness out here.
He's got a weird thing about his vehicle, and we get the impression from his one scene that the power of his position has absolutely gone to his head. And wrapping up this section, we have the truck driver. He seems to be a good Samaritan for a moment, but yeah, real convenient part to grab when helping her into your truck there, buddy. But it's also more than a little unsettling that he jumps between that and showing more sinister sides. He seems to have a lot of big personality shifts in the limited screen time that he has. He makes a creepy remark about Annie's physical appearance, he rants about Ralph being crazy, and then ultimately does the exact thing Ralph did in trying to scare Annie away from the camp.
Camp Crystal Lake is jinxed.
We're not entirely surprised when we see her hitching a different ride in the very next scene. Finally, we reach the end of the gray area. We've now entered the dark side. These characters are the bad and evil. Kicking off the bad, we have the comic relief, Ned. He's supposed to be seen, we think, as a lovable trickster. Maybe his material hasn't aged well, or maybe it's the killer context of the whole situation that makes him just seem like more of an insensitive jerk than anything.
You're beautiful when you're angry, sweetheart.
He likes scaring people, gets overly handsy with Brenda, doesn't have any interest in doing his job or helping. He's guilty of fake outs and just general jackassery. He may be better than those coming up on the list. He's definitely not good or great by the strict grading system that the other characters have set. The Bronze Medal of Evil goes to Steve Christy. We don't know exactly what makes him want to open up a camp that everyone thinks is cursed, but we doubt his motivations are pure. Putting a pin in the fact that he is technically responsible for the whole thing, he's a terrible boss, a bad supervisor, and a total creep. He's somehow both a micromanaging control freak who dictates what all the counselors are doing at all times, and an absentee leader who drives off to get food while the counselors have to fend for themselves at the camp. Of course, his worst crime is the conversation he has with Alice, where she's explaining that she's not interested, and he still exits with an uncomfortable, lingering touch on her shoulder.
Thanks, Alice.
Our Silver Medal of Evil is actually going to go to Jason. He's barely even a character in this one. So it may seem like an odd choice, but the little bit of time that we know about him, it's as a tragic figure. He drowns in the lake while the counselors are busy, driving his mother to insanity and leaving the audience to feel for her, if only for a moment. We're including him on this list not because his mother hears his voice telling him to kill.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
Although that was something we also took into consideration, but because he attacks Alice, trying to pull her into the lake after she has just survived the worst night of her life. That scene is a bit ambiguous, as is Jason himself. But Alice is definitely attacked by something because she wakes up in the hospital, and it's definitely not Mrs. Voorhees, who is already decapitated at that time.
Then he's still there.
That means that Jason, regardless of his motivations and whatever his mother thought was going on, is very much alive in that lake somewhere, and we don't think that it's necessarily a good thing since he seems to be violent. And on that topic of violence, our Gold Medal of Evil goes to Mrs. Pamela Voorhees. Of course, we'll be talking more about her when we break down her overall score on the Evil board, but you had to know that she'd be our top pick. Even assuming it's okay to start murdering to keep a camp from opening, which it's not, by the way, there's the large issue that she really only needed to kill Steve to make this happen. But she actually starts with the counselors, seemingly to punish them for the sins of an entirely different group of counselors. She punishes not just the counselors who neglected her son, but all the counselors that follow as well.
Look what you did to him!
Apparently, she's been responsible for all the accidents that result in the rumors of the death curse because of her insistence that the camp not reopen. We sympathize with her loss, and it's clear that she's unwell, but there's really just not enough justification to save her from being definitely our most evil. So, let's see how she stacks up on our evil board. As usual, we're ranking our killers on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being the highest evil score possible. We score them in 10 categories, each on a scale of 1 to 10, then tally them all together. Remember, more points equals more evil. First up, kill count. Mrs. Voorhees has a confirmed kill count of 9 in this movie, though rumors of the death curse imply that her number may actually be a little higher.
It's got a death curse.
Regardless, we're awarding her 3 points based on our chart. Next, does the killer have the capacity to love somebody? Anybody? Pamela does actually get a 0 out of 10 for this because we know that she does truly have the capacity to love somebody. She loved Jason, if anything, too much.
Oh, my sweet, innocent Jason.
Was the killer wronged in some way? We're going to go ahead and give her a 4. The wrongful death of a child is no small matter, and we're leaving her a couple evil points because A, the death really was an accident, and B, she is killing way more people than were involved in this incident. She was wronged, but it wasn't intentional, unlike the deaths that she is responsible for. Now, how much pleasure or joy does the killer get from their actions? We're going to give her a 4 out of 10 here because we don't really know if she gets much pleasure from it or not. Most of the deaths are seen from her eyes, so we don't get to see her reactions to it. I mean, she does seem sad by Brenda's death after the fact, but it's unclear if that's just for show.
What monster could have done this?
She gets the few points for the way her face does change when she starts trying to go after Alice. Does the killer need to kill to survive? No. This is something that we can't really say applies to Mrs. Voorhees. Does the killer have some warped moral code or believe that they are killing for the greater good? We're going to give her a 9 out of 10 here. While she doesn't have much of a moral code, and we're not sure how much she really believes in the greater good, we know that she kills at least in part based off of a very passionate belief that Camp Crystal Lake should not open.
Oh, I couldn't let them open this place again.
Is the killer especially cruel in how they kill or torture? Mrs. Voorhees is only going to get a 3 out of 10 here. Although her murders make for some gruesome on-screen kills, they're all pretty quick deaths. The cruelest part is the chase scenes and the luring out the victims. Do the killers show mercy? She shows some sympathy for her victims, but never mercy. Even after comforting Alice for a minute, she goes on a crazy rant and then tries to kill her. We're saying that she shows no mercy. Do the killers have any diminished mental capacity? Mrs. Voorhees does have some diminished mental capacity. We see her talking to herself as both herself and Jason while she's chasing after Alice, and it's not a leap to say that she's at the very least unhinged. We're going to drop her evil score for this count down to a 4 out of 10. Are either killer a demon, satanic, or otherwise an extension of the devil or hell? She is not, as far as we know. Finally, our formula requires us to divide their score by 50% if a killer was being controlled by some known supernatural or otherwise mind-controlling entity. It would be a pretty big leap to say that Jason has mind-controlling powers and is actually behind this, so we're going to go ahead and just leave her score as is. So the final score on our evil board comes out to Mrs. Voorhees with a total evil score of 47 out of 100. Now, let's wrap up this leaderboard with the kill-death ratios, as well as our Saints and Sinners medals. Probably our most straightforward KDR leaderboard yet. Mrs. Voorhees racks up a total of 9 kills with 1 death, that kill going to Alice, and of course Jason's fugly self gets 1 death, but no kills yet. But don't worry, Jason. There's plenty of time in this series to improve that score. Now, let's award some medals, starting with our Saints. The gold, silver, and bronze medals of good go to Annie, Bill, and Alice, respectively. Our medal for most righteous kill has to go to Alice for her decapitation of Mrs. Voorhees. Our greatest sacrifice medal was very hard to award this time, but we're going to go ahead and give it to Bill. He died trying to look after Alice, which is somewhat noble despite its stupidity. As far as our sinner medals go, the gold, silver, and bronze medals of evil go to Mrs. Voorhees, Jason, and Steve, respectively. The cruelest kill has to go to Mrs. Voorhees for her slaying of Annie. The death itself isn't notably worse, but the chase scene was brutal. The poor girl was injured, and it was one of the saddest chase scenes, showing Pamela as a truly merciless villain. The worst betrayal medal also goes to Mrs. Voorhees. You think that she's going to help Alice, and even though it isn't a very long-lived ploy, you still feel a little betrayed when the nice lady in a sweater mourning Brenda's death turns out to be the one who killed her.
It'll be easier for you than it was for Jason.
The Darwin medal has to go to Claudette. Whereas Annie's chase scene had some explanation for being bad, Claudette seemed almost to crave death with her inability to run away. And finally, our 7 deadly sin medals. The lust medal goes to Barry. His relationship with Claudette gets them both killed, and she will actually be taking the sloth medal for how easy she makes it to get murdered as she takes her sweet time backing away from the killer. The envy medal goes to Mrs. Voorhees as Jason, who she seems to think would envy the living campers and definitely seems to hold a grudge. She also gets the Wrath medal as herself for, well, killing all the counselors. But taking home a record 3 out of 7 Deadly Sins medals is none other than the camp owner, Steve Christie. He gets the Pride medal for thinking he can reopen the camp despite everyone telling him it's a bad idea. Since he's doing it for financial gain, we're going to go ahead and toss the Greed medal in on top of that. And we're going to toss the Gluttony medal on top of that for treating himself to coffee while his employees are left to fend for themselves. And that's it. The entire cast of Friday the 13th ranked from most good to most evil. Don't forget to keep a lookout for our videos covering the sequel, and let us know in the comments what other scary movies you might like to see. Do us a huge favor and like this video, as well as hit that notification bell, so you know whenever we upload a new video to Blood Binge, where we satisfy your thirst for all things horror. Thanks for watching.